Mr. Brady, and a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And can I first congratulate the Right Honourable Gentleman for South Suffolk for securing this debate today. It's a shame actually that there aren't, as I think he reflected, more people here to take part in this debate. It brings to mind a sharp contrast with the debates we had on the closing stages of the infrastructure bill in the last few weeks, where there seemed to be very many people interested in one particular aspect as it applied to energy policy, but who aren't here today. And I think that, in a way, and from other parties as well that are represented in the House, some of the smaller parties, and I think that's a shame that they're not here to take part in this debate today, because I think in his wide-ranging contribution, the member for South Suffolk touched on a number of very important and significant issues, and apart from a number of slightly more partisan points that he made, there was actually quite a lot that I agree with, and he probably won't be surprised at that, because we've debated a number of these issues over the course of the last 5 years, and there is, as he reflected, a degree of consensus. And I think it's always important with consensus that we don't let that slip into complacency. But there are good reasons to seek a consensus, because what we're talking about in terms of energy investment and energy decisions are decisions which will last a lot longer than any of us will be likely to be in this House, and a lot longer than any government lasts. And they are long-term decisions often, and it's important that we seek to debate and discuss and scrutinise those with that in mind. I'm also pleased to see that the Honourable Member for Preston North and Wyre is in his place again. The Minister for Energy, the member for West Suffolk, isn't here. I think I may have upset him, because it seems whenever we have a debate in this chamber or a statutory instrument, it seems to be that the member for Preston North and Wyre is here in his place, and that is a good thing, because I think he is more than capable of being able to explain and discuss the government's position. And of course, the Energy Minister is a very busy and important man, and probably has very busy and important things to do elsewhere as well. But I think he would actually benefit sometimes from being in some of these debates, because they do, I think, help to illustrate the wide range of issues which come into his department's brief, and the range of issues that we seek to discuss. Now, the member for South Suffolk started talking about climate change and the need to tackle climate change, and touched on the statement from the three larger party leaders in the last week or so. And of course, it's important to remember that the reduction of emissions in terms of energy, as my honourable friend from Innis Mon touched on, is only part of the challenge in terms of emissions. There are challenges in relation to transport and heating and industry as well, but that in energy supply and electricity there is significant progress that can be made. And the member for South Suffolk and my honourable friend from Edinburgh North and Leith, in his earlier intervention, touched on the announcement today in relation to the outcome of the contract for difference auctions. And I would just reflect on that in the context of offshore wind, the member for South Suffolk referred to Britain being in the lead in terms of offshore wind. Actually, and it doesn't give me any great pleasure to say this particularly, but it's England that's in the lead in terms of offshore wind, because there's 20 times more installed capacity in English waters than there are in Scottish waters, despite sometimes the claims that are made. But there are a number of projects in Scotland which have been successful in what was being announced today, including, as was referred to, an offshore wind project, which I hope gives us in Scotland an opportunity to try to make some progress. And of course, that is underpinned by the UK-wide system of support that we enjoy, which benefits Scotland hugely in terms of being able to develop renewable technologies, but it also benefits everybody in all parts of the UK for the power that is therefore supplied. Although the discussion in the last few days around the potential closure of Longannet coal-fired power station in Scotland does illustrate that we have an increasingly imbalanced energy supply in Scotland, and we have to be careful to ensure that we don't end up with a situation where, as is now the case, one day in six, for at least part of one day in six, we are now importing or energy is transferring from England to Scotland to keep the lights on, particularly at times of high demand and when the wind isn't blowing. And members in the House may not have been where I was between Christmas and New Year, but it was very cold, there was no wind at all, and if it wasn't for power generated in other parts of the UK, come to Scotland, the lights may well have gone out, and that would have been a very significant and serious issue. So that's why I maintain the view that we need to have a balanced energy mix, and I think that's probably the view of everybody who's here taking part in this debate this afternoon, but that low carbon technologies there are a range of low carbon technologies. Sometimes people make the mistake of assuming that low carbon equals renewable. Now, renewables are a significant part of low carbon technology, but not the full suite, and we've had some discussion this afternoon in relation to nuclear, and I'll come on to say a few more words about that shortly. And we've also there are also other potential opportunities, other technologies, including carbon capture and storage, if it can be developed, that help to meet some of those emissions targets and as we renew our generation fleet. The member for South Suffolk also touched on the issues around the attitude of business and how refreshing it was that in the course of his time that he has been an advocate of low carbon technology, that the attitude of business seems to have changed, and I think that's something to be welcomed. He will recall, as I will, that during the course of the what is now the Energy Act, when we were discussing a number of issues, particularly around some longer term targets for decarbonisation, that it wasn't something that was just advocated by NGOs with a particular interest. Actually, there were a lot of businesses who were also advocating the need for a 2030 decarbonisation target, and the cross-party amendment which he was part of proposing, which sadly didn't quite make the bill, but make the act, but was supported across by a number of people in his party and in other parties as well as in mine, that there was a need for a longer term signal than we currently have, and that is a significant part of that. And in relation to the points around offshore wind, of course, the issues around cost and offshore wind are partly to do with scale, and that is partly to do with the opportunities there may well be for manufacturing and supply chain, which require a long-term signal to have that investment happen. And whilst I welcome obviously Siemens' investment in Hull, there could be much more of that, I think, if we had a much longer sense of direction and targets that then can give that certainty and that predictability which members have talked about, to be able to make those investments. He talked also about lowest cost decarbonisation. I tend to prefer best value decarbonisation, because I think there is a value in seeking to ensure that a number of technologies are developed and that we don't necessarily run the risk of missing out on some which can help, particularly in relation to renewables, which may be less intermittent than those which are currently commercially viable. And I think it's important that we continue, as my honourable friend from Innismon said, in relation to some of the research which is going on in his university and his constituency. But just in the last few months, I've seen at the University of Hull in relation to some of the software development to help in terms of cutting down costs without compromising safety, in terms of installing offshore wind, for example, in the Energy Research Centre at the University of Strathclyde under the leadership of Professor Jim MacDonald, and in Edinburgh the facility for testing marine technology, which are all good examples of where we have great academic and research expertise which should help benefit the UK more widely in terms of the economic benefits which can come from the inevitable and desirable need to move to a much lower carbon mix for our generation supply. The member for South Suffolk also made the point in relation to nuclear power and his celebrating of the fact of the broad consensus that there is in relation to new nuclear being part of that mix. I think he may have been slightly churlish in his comments in relation to party political support and where it was, because he will know that actually it was the Energy Minister, when he was Energy Minister, Brian Wilson, former member of this House, who began that process towards identifying sites and agreeing the process, which is important to get that right, to give the confidence that he spoke about ahead of and help to maintain that confidence through Fukushima, that process was established, and at a time when his party leader said nuclear was a last resort, and the Energy Secretary's party was implacably opposed to nuclear. So I'm glad we've got to a position now where there is support for new nuclear as a low carbon base load technology within that lower carbon mix, and that's something which I hope continues into the future. But he was also right to make the points in relation to affordability and cost, because when the European Commission were able to find a significant cost savings in their scrutiny of the agreement between the government and EDF, I think that indicates the importance of ensuring that there is a proper eye kept on costs in the nuclear sector, not to compromise safety, to make sure things are done effectively and as affordably as possible, because if they don't, then we run the risk of then seeking to have a technology which seems very, very expensive compared to a number of alternatives, although they don't provide the same broad range of advantages, but will look on paper to be very much more expensive. And I think it's important that that is something which the industry take their role in, as well as regulators and government as well, to ensure that that's done in the most efficient way possible. He also spoke in relation to a number of issues around the capacity mechanism, and I think it will be whoever is in government post-May to make, I think, some very important decisions in relation to how the next capacity market auction happens and the applicability. I still have some degree of doubt as to why existing nuclear power should actually be included within the capacity market, but I think the points he made in relation to demand side management are well made. It seems a very small amount in the first round, and I think that's something which could and should be addressed for the future. And I welcome the fact that the government have moved in relation to interconnection as well, because I think that's an important other way of, and a potentially quite efficient way of being able to meet some of those objectives. He did touch on the issues in relation to gas and the amount of gas we need, and members here today will know that 80% of our heating comes from gas. We will continue to need gas for a significant period for heating, and we also will need gas as a source of peaking power capacity as well. So the debate around the sustainability of our gas supplies, where they come from, is an important one. And I note that the Committee on Climate Change have published some new information in relation to following the debates on the infrastructure bill about how potentially shale gas may be part of that mix and will meet in line with climate objectives. I think, though, it's important in relation to that wider debate on shale that we make sure that the regulation is properly robust and the monitoring comprehensive, to ensure there is public confidence before then anything takes place, and that also that it's done, any exploration or extraction is done within the context of those wider carbon commitments, and I think that's something which probably he agrees with as well. And I think that's the way in which that debate should be taken forward, although that I realise that is sometimes difficult, particularly as we get closer to a general election. My honourable friend from Innis Mon, who is a member of the Select Committee that the member for South Suffolk chairs, made a number of very important points. He again made the point about consensus, and I think that is important when we're dealing with long-term policy. As I said before, consider consensus rather than complacency, and I think it's right that government's policy are properly scrutinised, but we need to do that with an eye to the long-term objective that we want to meet. He touched on a number of different issues which the Select Committee have touched on in their recent work, which impact on the debate around low-carbon generation, low-carbon technology, and the importance of stability in terms of policy. As I said, important in the context of attracting investment and securing the maximum possible economic benefits. He also talked about the issues in his own area and the energy island of Anglesey, which I know that the Minister knows that part of the world very well, and I have been there in the past, and I know it's a very beautiful part of the world, but it's also, from what he said, obviously a place where there is a huge amount of creativity in coming up with some potentially really good opportunities in terms of energy. And it's not just about the nuclear power station, it's about a number of different aspects as well, and particularly that decentralised energy that he talked about in his contribution. The issues around investment and business certainty, I think, are very important. I think my honourable friend from Minister Monmouth certainly was on the committee of what was then the Energy Bill, which became the Energy Act, and he will recall that the head of energy finance at RBS gave oral evidence to the Bill Committee and said in that the importance of having that 2030 decarbonisation target was absolutely critical. He said absolutely critical from the conversations I have with potential supply chain investors, because they point out it's difficult for them to take investment to their board if they really only have visibility of 3 or 4 years worth of work. And that is really where we are, because we have visibility to 2020 in terms of levy control framework, but not beyond that. That's an important issue for, again, the government, the next government to properly address in terms of taking forward the levy control framework, both in terms of its structure and the amounts, but it's also important in terms of that longer-term decarbonisation target, which I think is very important and continues to be important. I will indeed, yep.
Just on that point, because it's something I omitted to say, the Honourable is absolutely right to draw attention to the importance of the long-term predictability of support. And I and my committee believe it would be helpful if the next government would commit to an annual rolling update of the levy control framework total. So there's always a period of 7 years. When it was set, it was 7 years ahead. If there was always a period of 7 years ahead, that would facilitate investment decisions and actually therefore tend slightly to reduce the cost of investment and therefore consumer prices.
Yeah, I think, thank you for the intervention. He makes a very important point in relation to the cost of risk and the cost of uncertainty. And I think whoever is in government in a few weeks' time needs to quite early look at the way in which the levy control framework will be taken forward. And as I said, both in the structure of the mechanism, the way it's, as well as the amounts, it's not just about the amount of money, it's about the way in which that's calibrated and the way in which it's taken forward. And I'm sure whoever the energy minister is in a few weeks, in 72 days, will or should have his committee's report in their in-tray to consider amongst those issues. As I said before, I touched on demand-side response, and I think the work that the Select Committee have done on that has been, important, and the exchange of correspondence that the chair of the Select Committee had with the Energy Minister was interesting, and I think indicates, I hope, that there is still some opportunity for the government to take that more seriously going forwards, and I hope that will be the case, as I said, in relation to the capacity market for the next round of auctions, which will happen towards the end of this calendar year. The other technology which we haven't really touched on is carbon capture and storage. I don't think there is any serious modelling of our energy mix in 2030 that doesn't include a role for fossil fuel plants and industrial processes running carbon capture and storage. And I think carbon capture and storage is one of the key tools that we need to meet our decarbonisation agenda, but also do that in a way which helps to sustain some very important industrial processes which are important for our wider manufacturing base as well, and we don't just offshore that activity. But it's also an opportunity that I think is sometimes overlooked, both in terms of the potential benefits in terms of the cost saving to meeting carbon targets. Members will be aware that the Energy Technology Institute estimate that deploying CCS could reduce the cost of meeting UK carbon targets by 30 to 40 billion pounds, or up to 1% of GDP by 2050, is at the end of a very important and significant piece of work. But it's also an area where we have a degree of academic and expert knowledge in the UK, and we know there's lots of work going on in places such as in Edinburgh. We know there's the 2 projects which are currently undergoing their FEED studies. I think it's important that in relation to taking forward the tools and the mechanisms for low carbon investment, that the contracts for difference are tweaked in terms of as they need to be appropriate for CCS development into the future, because it would be, I think, remiss of us to have 2 exemplar projects that are funded through the competition and then for nothing else to come behind that. And the key to that is making sure that the contract for difference properly is applicable to CCS, which is different in the structure of that investment than either new nuclear or many renewable technologies. And I think that that's something where it would be good for the government to, and again, whoever is in the government in a few weeks' time, to be very clear about their ambition for CCS, and also to seek to unblock some of the issues which have caused some of the delay in progress in relation to CCS. Now, I'm conscious that in this debate there has been a lot of talk about consensus, and the consensus about the policy tools for incentivising low carbon investments. That hasn't, unfortunately, prevented a bit of a fraying in the consensus on the need for such investment in the first place in some of the debates that we've had in this House over the course of the last 5 years. My sense is, only having been here for 5 years, that consensus has deteriorated amongst some members of this House. I think it's right that the costs of decarbonisation are properly scrutinised. I think it's right that people carefully consider the impact, potential impact of different technologies in different places. But I think it's something which we should all resolve for the future and beyond the election, for those of us that might be here, that we need to ensure that that consensus is properly wedded again, so that we can make sure that we achieve what we need to achieve in terms of both renewing our generation supply and doing so in the lowest carbon way possible, and in a way that benefits the wider economy in the UK. And I hope that's something which, regardless of political and party difference and other issues, is something that can be taken forward by the new Parliament, because it's far too important for it not to be. Thank you.
Minister.